see what we can do and have a chat about equality and diversity, which is the topic of today's webinar. So, as a general rule, we all know that everyone should be treated fairly and that we aren't allowed to discriminate against people. I mean, that's just basic, just being nice people, isn't it? But when you talk about equality and diversity in the workplace, where does the responsibility lie when it comes to companies and the behaviour of your employees? It's important for companies to be seen as embracing everyone from society, as the alternative could massively impact a business in terms of reputation and revenue should public opinion change. I did some research for this webinar and came across a case called Lee versus Asher's Baking Company Limited and others. And this was a story of a cake shop that refused to create a cake for a customer that was attending a private event in support of same-sex marriage, on the grounds that the customer's sexuality was against the business owner's Christian beliefs. And I remember seeing this in the news actually, kind of divided people about, you know, your right to your religious beliefs versus the Equality Act, and how the law would view that. And the business owner was actually fined for refusing to serve this customer. So as a company, you need to be thinking about how, as a corporation, you are behaving to your customers, how your employees are behaving to customers, and also how your employees are behaving to each other. That's important. I also found some information quite recently about a Starbucks employee who won a disability discrimination case against her company because she had dyslexia, and her dyslexia was causing her to make fundamental mistakes. It was to do with recording temperatures on refrigerators, but the courts found that her company hadn't made those reasonable adjustments, hadn't made allowances for her dyslexia, and the court case was found in her favour. So basically, it makes good business sense to embrace an all-encompassing equality and diversity policy. And also, just basically from a moral standpoint, it will make your company a nicer place to work with and to deal with. I read about the Department for Business Innovation and Skills that had produced a report saying firms have benefited from equality and diversity, and they've done so by making it part of their business strategy instead of treating them separately. So just make it about the way your company operates. I read about ACAS as well, and they said that having staff at all levels from a wide range of backgrounds and skills can help develop a working environment, producing ideas and solutions that might not come from a smaller array of diverse groups. A diverse workforce can also help an organisation better understand and meet diverse customer expectations. So basically, embracing equality and diversity, you're only going to make your company better. So your company should have a policy on equality and diversity, but how far does your company go with that? Do you train your staff on the impact of the Equality Act? Is it enough to just add a paragraph in the employee handbook people get on their first week of induction? Or is it enough to put a notice up on the board of the staff room and expect people to read that? Are you doing your due diligence? Recent case law has shown that companies can be held liable for discriminatory actions of their staff even when their staff are on their break. In October 2015, a locksmith was found to be in breach of the Equality Act when a staff member taunted a customer who had asked for a refund with some homophobic gestures. So no words were even spoken or written, it was just gestures. And even though that staff member was on a break and outside of the shop, he was still found to be acting in the course of his employment, and the locksmiths had to pay £7,500 damages. So, I mean, God, you're leaving yourself wide open if you're not providing the right training for your staff. So without further ado, I'm going to take you through the course that we offer. Thanks for bearing with us, guys. I hope some of you are still listening. So the word diversity literally means difference. And the concept of diversity is recognizing that people are different in ways such as their age, gender, any disabilities they may have, their religion or beliefs, ethnicity, or their sexual orientation. Prejudiced attitudes towards these differences may result in inequalities or discrimination. And diversity is about recognizing differences, valuing people as individuals, treating people fairly according to their individual needs. And what's equality? Equality is about creating a fairer society where everyone can participate irrespective of age, gender, race, culture, sexual orientation, disability, religion or beliefs. Each person is given the opportunity to fulfill their potential, and all people are treated fairly, according to their individual needs. So the changing population of the UK is getting more and more diverse every day, and this trend is predicted to continue. By 2035, it's predicted that 23% of the population will be over 65. Approximately 19% of the UK's working population has a disability that affects their day-to-day lives. By 2051, it's anticipated 20% of the UK population will be Black, Asian and minority ethnic. In a recent survey, 55% class themselves as Christian, but 40% express no religion. Less than 6% of the executive board-level directors of the UK's 150 biggest businesses are women. It's believed that 5 to 7% of the UK population are lesbian, gay or bisexual. And an estimated 2 to 5% of the UK population are transgender. That's a wide proportion of society that we'd be missing out on if we were prejudiced against them. As the world continues to change and become more diverse, the requirements of society will also change. Creating societies where everyone's needs are recognised and catered for is a challenge that everybody will need to meet. Let's find out how. So why are diversity and equality important? Financial reasons, as mentioned. Businesses who ignore these changes may isolate a large number of potential customers and employees in addition to existing customers and employees. Statistics on spending here. So the grey pound, meaning the spending of over 65s, is worth an estimated £100 billion a year. 70% of all customer spending is decided by women. Spending power of disabled people is estimated to be in excess of 80 billion a year. And ethnic minority spending power could soon top 300 billion a year. So it makes commercial sense for companies to get their approach to equality and diversity right. And legal reasons. So the major piece of legislation covering this is the Equality Act 2010. Covers many areas, including employment and the provision of goods and services. And as well as financial and legal reasons why diversity and equality are important, there is also a wider moral reason. As society continues to become more diverse, so will the expectation that mutual respect and inclusion are common practice in all aspects of day-to-day life. Should just be a given, really, shouldn't it? And let's go on to the Act. So the Equality Act came into force in October 2010 and replaced all the existing legislation on it, such as the Equal Pay Act, Sex Discrimination Act, Race Relations Act, Disability Discrimination Act. So it was to simplify the legislation by bringing it all together onto one act to protect people from discrimination or harassment as a result of having one of the protected characteristics, which we go into in more detail later on. So what changes did this act bring? It protected people during the recruitment process, so it's illegal to ask questions on disability or health until after a job offer has been made. Protected people from being discriminated against by being associated with somebody from a protected group. Protecting pregnant women and new mothers, including the right to breastfeed in public, which is still something I can't believe people have a problem with. An equality duty placed on the public sector to consider the needs of all people in protected groups. And a change in the definition of gender reassignment, meaning that a person doesn't need to be under medical supervision to be covered. So what are those protected characteristics that we've talked about? There are 9 of them. So age, disability, gender, marriage or civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sexual orientation, and gender reassignment. And what's the definition of a disability? A physical or mental impairment that has a substantial or long-term adverse effect on the ability to perform normal day-to-day activities. So substantial means more than minor or trivial. Long-term means the impairment has lasted or is likely to last a minimum of 12 months. Normal day-to-day activities include washing, dressing, eating, walking, shopping. This definition is open to interpretation, and if you're in any doubt, you should speak to your manager or human resources department for guidance. Some conditions are automatically covered under the Act, including HIV and AIDS, cancer, multiple sclerosis. Others are specifically not covered, such as addiction to drugs or alcohol. So what are the types of discrimination we could be talking about? I've already mentioned discrimination, victimization, and harassment. Direct discrimination is where a person is treated less favorably as a result of having a protected characteristic. For example, refusing to train somebody because they're over 50, or sacking someone because they're gay. Indirect discrimination is a way of doing things that has a worse impact on someone with a protected characteristic than someone without one. So stating that a job requires a minimum of 10 years experience automatically gets rid of the younger people. Or a complete ban on headgear may adversely impact certain religions. Or a minimum height requirement could exclude women. Discrimination arising from a disability is treating a disabled person less favourably because of something connected with their disability, where it can't be shown that what is being done can be objectively justified. For example, not employing someone to do a supervisory job because they're visually impaired, or a strict policy of no dogs, including assistance dogs. Discrimination by association is where someone's treated less favourably because they're associated with someone who has a protected characteristic. For example, the parent of a disabled child or adult being denied promotion or refusing to promote an employee because their partner's bisexual. Discrimination by perception is discrimination by someone who wrongly perceives the person to have a protected characteristic. For example, an employee refusing to serve a customer because they wrongly believe she's transgender, or refusing to promote an employee because everyone believes them to be younger than they are. Objective justification. There are some limited circumstances where an otherwise discriminatory action can be objectively justified. This is where something can be shown to be a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. That is, a way of achieving the aim is appropriate and necessary. For example, a women's refuge dealing with cases of domestic violence by men may be able to objectively justify advertising for women-only counsellors. And what's harassment? The Act defines it as unwanted conduct related to a relevant protected characteristic which has the purpose or effect of violating an individual's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for that individual. For example, unwanted physical contact or sexual advances from a colleague or customer, or personal insults, offensive language, and offensive jokes. Victimization means treating someone less favorably because they have reported or complained about discrimination or harassment, or are supporting somebody else who's made this type of report or complaint. So refusing to promote an employee because they've raised a grievance, you just can't do that. Or a management ignoring an employee because they've reported them for harassment. What to do? So if you've experienced or witnessed any form of discrimination, victimization or harassment, you should report it immediately to your line manager or human resources department. Companies are required to have policies and procedures in place to protect their employees. Make sure that you are aware of yours and what you need to do. And as always, guys, if you wanted to adapt our courses and personalize them to your company or to your specific procedures or to contact a particular person within your organization, we're always able to put an element of bespoke work into our courses. And onto the responsibilities of employers. You have a duty to ensure that people with protected characteristics aren't treated less favorably in terms of recruitment and selection, policies and procedures, pay and benefits, making reasonable adjustments, and training, development, and promotion. Employers must ensure that their recruitment and selection processes are fair and don't disadvantage those with a protected characteristic, including making sure that job adverts don't discriminate. For example, asking for fit, healthy, enthusiastic candidates could discourage disabled people from applying. or making reasonable adjustments for candidates at interview, for example, employing a sign language interpreter for a deaf candidate. The Equality Act makes it illegal for employers to ask questions about health or disability until after a job offer is made. This means that the candidate is judged on their performance without any disability or health condition being taken into account. If you believe that your recruitment or selection processes procedures are discriminatory, you should report it. All policies and procedures must be written down so they don't discriminate. This includes grievance policies, recruitment and selection procedures, appraisals and performance management, dress codes and codes of conduct. And again, if you believe your company's policies aren't doing this, you should report it. The Equality Act covers pay and benefits, meaning that pay and benefits should be the same, irrespective of having a protected characteristic. This includes equal pay for women and men undertaking the same work or work of equal value, or pay secrecy clauses. It's now illegal to stop employees from discussing their level of pay and benefits to establish if differences are related to a protected characteristic. And protected characteristics, you must make reasonable adjustments to support employees with a disability in undertaking their role. This includes policies and procedures to make sure they don't disadvantage the disabled person, physical features such as wheelchair ramps and disabled toilets, equipment, for example, specialist computer software. I was talking to Chris before we started the webinar, actually, when he was going to join it. He was going to mention about when we built our WorkRite building, we actually built that in mind for hiring people and being able to get a wheelchair into the building. Reasonable adjustments, they take on many forms, including allowing time off to attend medical appointments, specialist chairs and workstations, a larger computer screen for someone with visual impairment, allowing someone with dyslexia extra time to complete their duties or training, regular breaks for employees who need to take medication, flexible working options to allow an employee to manage a medical condition. If you feel that you may require a reasonable adjustment, speak to your manager or human resources department. Employers must ensure that employees with protected characteristics are not treated less favorably in terms of their training, development, and promotion. This includes ensuring that employees aren't excluded because of their age, equal promotion opportunities for all employees, and making sure that reasonable adjustments are in place to support disabled employees. The Equality Act also allows employers to take positive action to encourage diversity in the workforce by employing and promoting employees from underrepresented groups. In reality, this means that if an employer is faced with two candidates of equal merit, they can appoint or promote the candidate from the underrepresented group in preference to the other candidate. And in summary, so we've learned what equality and diversity mean and understanding that people are different, because the UK is a diverse nation. It makes business sense and because of the law. We've gone into detail about the Equality Act and its impact. We know prohibited conduct. We know what we shouldn't be doing. And we know the employer's duty. So to summarise, you must have a policy in place and take steps to enforce that and fully train your staff on what your company equality and diversity policy means. When I was researching, I read an article from a fellow called Bob Patchett on Krona, and he wrote about the Equality Act. A pessimist whose glass is half empty may look at the Equality Act and recognise its monumental complexity, and as a result try to avoid the topic of equality and diversity. But an optimist whose glass is half full will recognise how easy it is to ignore the differences in people, their origin, religion, gender, height, hobbies, dress sense, and treat them all equally well and with respect. Try it yourself and lead your employees to do so. It really is quite simple and makes for a happy community of employees. So I'm going to close with that thought. I think that's quite a nice thought. Well done, Bob. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm now joined you for the last hurrah. So I hope everyone found that interesting, and thank you, Ellie. That was really good. So go out and enjoy the weekend.
If you've got any questions, guys, contact me.